This is Brent of the Brookbush Institute, and in this video we're going to do vibration or percussive release techniques with my Hypervolt from Hyperice. I'm going to have my friend Melissa come out. She's going to help me demonstrate. Now, if I'm doing gastroc and soleus release as I am in this video, we're going to assume that I already did assessment. Melissa was complaining about some plantar fasciitis, so we did our overhead squat assessment. She had excessive forward lean, and then I wanted some way to be able to assess improvement, so I did a little goniometry, and she actually has a restriction in dorsiflexion. These are great reasons to use a little bit of vibration release. Now, the vibration release techniques do work a little different than, like, let's say foam rolling or our static manual release techniques. Rather than going for deep trigger points and staying in one place, we're going to use a slightly different protocol here. Now, you'll notice Melissa's body position. Since I'm working on her calf, I have her laying face down, and I actually have her ankles off the end of the table. And the reason I like having the ankles off the end of the table like this is because I can now control dorsiflexion with my thigh, which will control how much tension is in this tissue, which is kind of a nice benefit to have as I'm going through this technique. To start off with, I'm going to use the flat round piece that comes with my Hypervolt, and I find that it works very well for the lower extremity. And a little counterintuitive, I'm actually going to start on the higher frequency setting. So this is number 3. And the reason being is I'm also going to start very superficial. So when I'm doing these techniques initially, I'm just using the weight of the Hypervolt itself. I don't need to push any deeper. I'm just going to let the frequency do all the work. Now you'll also notice that rather than staying in one place like I would with a foam roll, or finding like a trigger point and doing my static manual release techniques in one spot, I'm also going to glide through the entirety of the tissue for the muscle that I'm working on. Now I am going to pay attention to areas that I think are a little bit more dense or maybe have a little bit higher tone. But overall, I'm just going to kind of slowly work my way through her entire calf complex. I kind of got a mowing the lawn pattern here going right now. Now, as I'm going through and I'm taking note, a little counterintuitively, the reason I'm taking note is we then might go back with a smaller piece, something with less surface area, so we increase the pressure a little bit. I'm going to decrease the frequency, and I'm going to be able to dig into the tissue a little deeper for those more stubborn or denser areas. And that's definitely a dense area right here for Melissa. All right, so steps 1 are kind of just superficially going over the tissue on the higher frequency settings, but monitoring some parts where you think maybe they could use another pass, or maybe a little deeper work with a lower intensity and in this case, pointier tool. You might be thinking to yourself, it doesn't matter whether skin or clothes. Because we glide over the tissue, I actually find that thin clothing is actually better. So Melissa's yoga pants here are absolutely perfect. Because there's some moisture in your skin, you sometimes get a little caught up on the skin, whereas you can glide really nicely over like basketball shorts or yoga pants, or even like these prana pants that I'm wearing here, which are kind of like those gym pants that look a little bit more like slacks. All right, so next step, I'm gonna go to this smaller piece, which I think Hypervolt calls the bullet here. And as I mentioned, a little counterintuitively, I'm going to stay on the low setting. Now, the high settings, you'll notice, you guys will be able to try this out yourselves. The high setting, if you even tried to dig in deeper into the tissue, the machine's going to kick you right back out, right? Because that frequency is so high. Or if you really press in, you're just going to cause a lot of pain. And obviously a lot of pain is not going to help us get releases. So I noticed Melissa was a little bit more tender or a little bit more dense in here. So I'm going to apply a little bit more pressure. You notice I'm not like digging in. I'm not using all my muscles to like get through and like penetrate bone. I'm just digging a little further into the tissue until I get a little density. And then again, I'm not necessarily going to stay in one spot, but I'm going to very slowly crawl through the tissue as I feel it release. Now for my manual therapists, the Hypervolt is light enough that you can use one hand and use this other hand to monitor tissue density. So for example, I felt like, okay, here I have an increase in tissue density, maybe I can even feel some hypertonic fascicles or some fascicles that are very guitar string-like. I can use my thumb to kind of figure out where they are and then put the tool over them and work through them, and then of course go back and monitor them again with my thumb. Not necessarily essential to make this effective, right? So for those of you who are not manual therapists or licensed manual therapists, Hypervolt is still a very effective tool, right? But I'm just going to work through the tissue here. And a little smaller piece. Now, of course, after I was finished with this, I could reassess, see if this technique was effective for what Melissa has going on with her movement impairment, and then go on with my other techniques. So just because I did this technique doesn't mean that I can't, again, we talked about maybe foam rolling first, maybe doing some lengthening techniques. Those of you guys who do other like dynamic release or pin and stretch techniques, you could absolutely follow up with this. What probably is happening with these vibration or percussive techniques is we're working a little bit more towards these Pacinian corpuscles and these Ruffini endings, and they're stimulated by vibration. And from what we can tell, somehow, neuromuscularly, some of those endings will help stimulate that inhibitory response, very similar to the way we expect like the Golgi tendon organ to act with autogenic inhibition. Stay tuned for the close-up recap. All right, guys, I wanted you to see a little bit of what this looks like as it passes through the tissue. So as I mentioned, I'm going to go ahead and start on the higher setting. All right, so we'll start on setting number 2. And I'm just going to slowly work my way from the bottom of her calf, right? Not necessarily her Achilles tendon. That might not feel very good. But I'm just going to slowly work my way through her entire calf complex. Just kind of one row at a time here. Notice a little extra tissue density, so maybe I slow down right here a little bit. Take note for using that other tool. All right, we'll go ahead and assume I just went through the entire calf complex. I'm going to go ahead and turn this off real quick just by pressing that button a couple more times. I'm going to pop out the flat piece, go to more of the bulleted piece. We noticed Melissa was a little bit more, the tissue density was a little higher right here. So now I'm going to go ahead and just put this on 1. Right? So it's a little lower frequency so I can get deeper into the tissue. Right? So if this is totally superficial, I'm just going to dig in maybe an extra 1/4 to 1/2 inch, and then really slowly work my way through the tissue as I feel it kind of let go underneath the Hypervolt. Of course, my manual therapist, you guys could come in here and go, okay, I feel a little bit more density in here. I can put this right behind. The Hypervolt's really easy to control with one hand. And I can kind of work my way through the tissue. Slowly but surely, go back through and monitor and see if those fascicles have let go. There you guys have it. Vibration release using the Hypervolt for the gastroc and soleus complex.